Get more on what we can expect from the National Coronavirus Command Council meeting. Let's talk to political analyst Karima Brown. So Karima, of course, we always ask you for a crystal ball during these instances, but I'm sure you can read into this meeting being called earlier than scheduled. What do you think?
Absolutely, Shahan. I think, there's been such a lot of fake news, particularly a few days ago when supposed lockdown 5 regulations was trending on social media platform Twitter. And of course, that is completely false. My understanding, Shahan, of what is being discussed at the Command Council meeting is that government is getting a fuller grip on the vaccine rollout. As you know, they've come under heavy criticism around that issue, and my understanding is that that is what the briefings are about. I expect, following the meeting of the Command Council, Shahan, that the scientists that serve on the various task teams that have been put together by the Health Ministry will start addressing the country. The other issue that is being discussed also is the second variant of the COVID-19 virus. As you know, it has already caused diplomatic incidents between ourselves and the UK. There are several variants in the world. The Government Command Council is getting the scientific lowdown on what exactly that means, and there's a couple of messages around that my sources in the Command Council have told me, and that is essentially that this variant is more virulent. It makes the disease spread faster, so there is a big worry about returning holidaymakers coming back to Gauteng, the question of the Western Cape, Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. So it brings us back to the question of behavior. So there's going to be a lot more emphasis on exactly that. Government is also very concerned, Shahan, about the conspiracy theories linked to the 5G conspiracy theory that's been flooding around. And a lot of this message is linked to charismatic churches and their counterparts in the US. And government is likely to make an appeal for people to not attach any value to such messages. So the vaccine rollout, scientists speaking on the question, the issue of explaining the second variant that has now been found in Nelson Mandela Bay, and that's driving the surge in numbers, and then also dealing with fake news linked to 5G. Those are my understanding, Shahan, the questions that the Command Council is busy dealing with.
And what about interprovincial travel, Karima? Because we've seen our numbers decline from 18 to 14,000 on average, but that's still a high daily infection rate, right? We're also seeing our death rate increase quite dramatically. So is there any potential of interprovincial travel? We're not going to level 5, but we are going to take more care with regards to people going across the country.
Shahan, I think you need to cast your mind back to just before the president reintroduced an adjusted level 3. So, for example, a province like the Northwest, there the health MEC, Mr. Samadoda Mbato, had said that all workers that work in mining industries, for example, will be put in self-isolation once they return. They will be tested whether they show symptoms or not. So I think different provinces are putting in place different mechanisms to ensure that specific communities that we know are prone to travel because of our migrant economic labor system will be put under, obligatory restrictions. The mining companies, for example, are coming to the party in a place like Northwest. The Gauteng government has also indicated that they're getting ready, for example, for an influx of people. So I don't necessarily think that there will be a ban on interprovincial travel. I think there will be a ring fencing of particular populations that we can target, for example, the mining industry, where we know that people live in other provinces and work in mining, heavy provinces. So in places like the Northwest, that is what will happen with that sector. But I think that individual behavior is going to be a big thing. If, for example, you have traveled with your family, the advice is and was then that you travel, come back earlier than you're supposed to go to work, isolate before before you go back into supposed normality in the province where you live. So I think there's going to be a combination, Shahan, of measures per sector, like in the mining sector, but there's going to be a lot of push on individual behavior. I don't see the provinces locking down in terms of travel. And then, as you know, there is already existing regulations that governs public transport, mandatory use of masks, sanitation, social distancing, and then, of course, also the question of the curfew, which is really, really a big issue, and the fact that super spreader events are completely illegal. So I think it's going to be a reiteration of those measures, Shahan. And I think Gauteng in particular, with that anticipated return and the spike, will probably see differentiated, regulations in terms of people returning. But I am not looking or foreseeing any wholesale, cancellation or ban on interprovincial travel.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's shift gears now. The NEC meeting for the first time this year. I mean, there's the big question, right? Ace Magashule, the decision regarding whether or not he steps down pending these criminal charges is key for the party.
Absolutely, Shahan. I spoke to a couple of NEC members just before I came on to do this live interview, and they are at the moment busy dealing with the January 8th statement. As you know, the statement sets the political tone for the party, and it is not a statement that is President Ramaphosa's statement. It is a collective statement from the NEC. So that is what they're busy with now. I'm not sure if the matter of Ace Magashule is on the agenda, but the preoccupation of the NEC meeting that is sitting as we speak is the January 8th statement. And for those who are looking for what would likely be in that January 8th statement, Shahan, my understanding is that it will essentially deal in large measure with municipal elections. As you know, this is an election year, and the ANC is going to use the opportunity of its January 8th statement to ring in its election campaign. And that is, of course, very important because it will have to claw back support in municipalities where it had lost support either to coalition governments or to opposition governments. So elections very much front and center of the ANC's January 8th statement to be expected, or rather to be addressed by Cyril Ramaphosa on January 8th. And on that also, Shahan, the president is likely to speak in his capacity as party president on January 8th. So there is going to be no address to the nation following the National Command Council that is also sitting.
And obviously the ANC will have to deal with so many other things, including PPE corruption that's tainted its image during this very difficult period in the country. They go into the local government elections. What are the right moves for them to reassure South Africans, or do they have any moves left at all?
You know, Shahan, it's so interesting that you asked that question. I'm not sure if you saw the video in which Minister of Human Settlements, Lindiwe Sisulu, lost it and, essentially bullied a housing activist in Khayelitsha Township in Cape Town. That video has gone viral. And she was basically being called out on the fact that she, according to this housing activist, did not, implement the promises that she made when she was there previously at the beginning of the lockdown. And she came across as really arrogant, bullying, in fact, shutting the phone off. And already people are quite angry with that kind of arrogant leadership. To bring me to the question of what you asked about whether they have any moves to make, those are certainly not the moves to make, Shahan. The question is whether people are going to believe in the African National Congress, which brings me to your pertinent question around Magashule. There is no way the ANC can talk about municipal elections without foregrounding the issue of corruption. As you know, the Secretary General goes to court next month in February on over 20 charges related to fraud and corruption. So I think they are going to have to foreground that issue, both in terms of candidates that they're going to make available, as well as who's going to be the faces of this campaign. So already Lindiwe Sisulu, putting her foot in her mouth, really, because housing is a very sensitive subject, and coming across as a bully and as someone who's not prepared to actually listen and be held accountable is certainly not the kind of move that a governing party, which is struggling to actually win back the trust of voters, needs to make at this time. I would imagine that the party would try and call her to order, particularly around that. And more importantly, it will have to get its messaging around Esma Khashule and others who stand criminally accused of corruption. It will have to get that message right, Shahan, because it is really, really walking a tightrope in trying to win the confidence of ordinary folk in municipalities.
Yeah, definitely the case. Thank you for your insight. Appreciate it. Political analyst Karima Brown.